In the first SRT video, we talked about how to make up to 700 horsepower, and today we're going to knock on the door of 1100. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mod Stars. I'm your host Z, be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and today is episode 10 of the Mopar Wars. That's me addressing the Mopar hate I've seen over the last 3 years now, and it's still very weird to me. At the top of this mentality ladder, people think if it's not a Hellcat or a Trackhawk, then the car is garbage. And at the bottom of the ladder, people think, oh, you have a V6, that's garbage. And we all know that couldn't be any further from the truth. For those who are new, welcome. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. For those who are not new, welcome back. Be sure you like, subscribe, and share. And during this entire series, we've realized that a lot of these platforms can compete with each other at certain levels. However, today, just like episode 9, we're going to talk about the upper tiers of those levels. And we're going to do it with the SRT8s. Now, these are 6.1 liters that were around from 2006 to 2008 or so. And what's cool about these, other than the increased displacement, the larger engine, is that they came with Brembo brakes, 306 final drive, and stiffer suspension. This was a really cool time for car companies. I mean, this is when we got the C6 Corvette. Chevy was doing their thing with the Cobalt SS, supercharged and turbocharged. The HHR, the Saturn Island Redline was still around. We got the Shelby Super Snake. And we just got GTRs going in the States, but I'm time traveling, but you get my point. This was a really cool time to be in the cars and car culture, period. But today we are going to talk about building these up more so than what we had before. So really quick, the SRT8s included, as you can see here, the Dodge Charger, the Chrysler 300, the SRT8 Jeep, aka the original Trackhawk. Wouldn't have a Trackhawk without this Jeep. Challenger, which has a manual transmission option, and believe it or not, the Dodge Magnum. So let's get into it, starting with forged internals. Now we have drop-in pistons and rods here. Yes, machining is required, but after that's settled, as the name puts it, they drop right in. Now these are rated for about 1,000 horsepower. Some have claimed up to 1,300 horsepower. First off, I don't know if this is to the wheels or to the crank. Second, whether it is or not, I'm guessing they used either a higher octane fuel like race gas or MS-109 or E85, nitrous, water methanol injection, or a combination of the 2 or 3 to reach that 1,300 horsepower goal. Not that there's anything wrong with that, just throwing it out there. Now, for anybody who wants to take your 6.1 and make it a lot bigger, you have stroker motor kits, starting with the smallest displacement being 405, and going all the way up to 426. Now, to put this in perspective, Dodge has it as 370 cubic inches from the factory, which is about, if you round it, 6.1 liters. 405 stroker kit, you're at 6.6 liters, and a 426 is about 7 liters. Now, depending on which displacement you choose will actually cater to what forced induction setup you use, be it turbocharger or supercharger. And I will say this: the popular approach may not deliver the best results. And that's going to be for the next video. But speaking of turbos and superchargers, let's talk about the Whipple specifically, and just superchargers in general. Now, rule of thumb with increasing boost on superchargers is that you can either run a smaller upper pulley, which is a supercharger pulley, and a larger lower pulley, which is a crank pulley, or both. Now, to put in perspective, every 1/8 of an inch smaller than the standard pulley is equivalent to 1 PSI or 1 pound of boost increased. So for the Whipples, for example, I believe the 6-rib standard pulley size is 3.5 inches. So if it goes from 3.5 to 3.425, for example, there's a really good chance you're going to see an increase of 1 pound of boost, if not a little bit more. And depending on your setup, that could be anywhere from 10 to 15 horsepower increase or more. And let's say you combine that with the ATI Super Damper, 18% larger, and you're looking at 2 to 3 pounds of boost. So we're talking anywhere from 20 to 30 more horsepower, and maybe even the same in torque, again, depending on your setup. Of course, you're going to need the fuel to accommodate the extra boost. We'll get to that in a little bit. But that's the general rule of thumb for any of these supercharger kits. I mean, Whipple, ProCharger, or Vortec. And the cool thing about Vortec is that it's really easy to find the different pulley sizes on their website. And the ProCharger ones are aftermarket, but so is all of this. So it's not that big of a deal. With that being said, we're going to talk about the turbo kit, the twin turbo kit, the Hellion Sleeper twin turbo kit. And I say sleeper because this is what it looks like when you pop the hood. You can't see anything. And go ahead and pause the video here so you can find the turbos underneath. Now, what's cool about this is, other than, the name and how it's laid out, you can run anywhere from as low as 5 pounds of boost to as high as 35 pounds of boost. More boost than what you'll ever need, right? And it does come with the JMS fuel pump booster, which if you have a stock fuel pump, even if you have upgraded injectors, this will increase the voltage on demand, so wide open throttle, to accommodate for the extra power. Now, depending on your budget and your goals, this might work for you. And for those who need a proper fuel system, then here's a twin fuel pump kit that's rated for 1200 horsepower. So from here, let's talk about fuel injectors, right? So we have, fuel injector clinics, 1000 cc's up to like 1240 cc injectors. They're plug and play, 85 compatible. If you have a Whipple, make sure you get the 38 millimeters so they fit properly. And with these size injectors, you can see anywhere from 900 plus to a little over 1000 horsepower with ease. So as I mentioned before, water methanol injection is an option. I mentioned this, I believe, if it wasn't the first 6.1 video, it was the first 5.7 video. E85 is not something that everybody has available to them, first off. And maybe you don't want to buy drums to fill up in separate tanks to go run anything, whether it's, no preps, drag racing, for quarter mile, eighth mile, Mexico night runs, whatever you want to call them, right? So, of course, water methanol injection is an option. It's a liquid intercooler specifically, and the methanol actually helps with timing too, so you still have a power increase as well. But as you see here, there's a tank here, so it does eventually run out, but it might be more convenient for you to do this setup than drive to that one gas station in your city, or they may not even be in your city, to get flex fuel that you may not really use that often. So something to consider. And again, depending on your goals, you may or may not need it. Moving on to other cooling options, make sure you get the 108-degree thermostat, and then catch cans are very important as well. And then we're moving on to basically the top end of the motor, cylinder heads. You can do port and polish heads, custom angle cut valves, springs and retainers, which will lead us to upgraded camshafts. Now, Comp Cam, they have different hydraulic rolling, cam options. The stage 2s, be it supercharged or turbocharged specific, they're out of stock, and I don't know why. It seems like a lot of their stuff for the 5.761s are out of stock, but that's okay. The stage 1s are still there, and it's similar duration, being 220, 230. And there's also the stage 2, I believe, supercharged cam is still there as well. If not, the stage 1 is. And it's something to look into. And if you don't want to wait for those to come back into stock, MMX has a custom grind option as well, so you can do the same specs. And it has all the hardware included, so they make it really convenient for you. From here, we're moving on to pretty much the rest of the driveline. Aluminum drive shaft from Drive Shaft Shop. They also have their axles that are rated for 1400 horsepower. And speaking of, as I mentioned beforehand, the differential is a 306, but the 392s of that era have a 390. So you can go from 306 to 390, and there's, believe it or not, a 372 option as well. Now for the manual transmission challengers, and this also includes the RT challengers, I forgot to mention that in episode 9. You got 3 options for clutches at this power level. So RST clutch is rated for 800 horsepower, and the RXT is rated for 1000, and there's another one for 1200. It's a twin disc clutch if you need it. Now, moving on to the automatic transmission cars, There is the NAG1 transmission, or NAG1. You get a transmission cooler, and if you want to build it a bit more, depending on your power goals, MMX has a stage 2 that's rated for 1,000 horsepower and the same in torque to the crank, and their stage 3 is rated to about 1,300 horsepower or more to the crank and the same in torque. Now, moving on to torque converters, FTI has torque converters rated for 750 to 1,000 plus. If you need one specifically for, say, like, if you're crazy enough to run 1200, I'm sure you can send your torque converter in and they can supply it with the parts that it needs to hold that power. Other than that, we have the flex plate, and again, for any automatic transmission cars, they're going to need that. Moving on to differential braces and drive shaft loops. Now, these are things that are important, especially for this power range, because, okay, to put it in perspective, even stock Hellcats break differentials at the drag strip, just off the line. So it would really help you to get a differential brace, and then the drive shaft loop is there for the same reason. And in case the drive shaft does snap for whatever reason, it's not dragging on the track or on the road and breaking apart, and you're doing everybody a favor, because we all know at the track when things break, they have to clean it and then re-prep it and wait for things to set, and then you go again, and that could take all day. So for your convenience and everyone else's, if you're gonna run at this level, get the loop. Other than that, everything else is the same as we talked about in episode 9. The brake upgrades, we have the Bear big brake kits, 6-piston caliper, and their 14-inch brakes. The max wheel size you can run on these are 18-inch wheels, just to keep that in mind. And the same goes for the upgraded Brembos, which are slotted and or drilled. And then, of course, BMR has their 15-inch big brake kit. It's catered specifically to drag racing. That's why they have their spindles and suspension kit with it as well, suspension links. But other than that, I know that the SRT8s have better suspension than the RTs of their time. I just don't know how good that suspension is, if that makes sense. So when I mention these suspension things, they are things that you can consider, especially if you're going to do some type of racing. But you may not have to take as many steps as you would with the 5.7 cars, the RTs. So something else to keep in mind. And for anybody who wants to improve your traction, for example, BMR does have adjustable and fixed rated, links, tow rods, control arms, and links. And of course, you have your sway bars and your strut bars as well. And that's pretty much it. It's a very similar approach to episode 9. It's just fewer steps along the way. Now, stay tuned for the next episode, because I'm going to talk about what I would build and why, if that makes sense, regarding the 5.7 and 6.1 Hemis. Like I said earlier in the video, and like I said in episode 9, the most popular approach may not deliver the best results. So I'm going to explain that in a very simple and educational way, and it might get a little philosophical as well. But I'm going to do the best I can to do it simply to where you all can understand where I'm coming from. A couple of theories of mine just based on what I've seen, not just, like dyno days or people's builds that are popular, but also in motorsport, like drag racing, Texas 2K, heads up drag racing, roll racing, and half mile type stuff. So that's all we got for today. Let me know what you guys think. Do you have a 6.1 SRT8? Do you want to get one? Like, subscribe, and share. And if you don't know, now you know, but do what you want to do.